And welcome to another Comics That Influence. And Jake, I have done a colored version of your graphic. So that should be fading away right now or has already faded away. So you'll be able to see that color graphic or the colors I applied to your
Uh,
graphic for Comics That Influence. So
we
I
got a
am
logo,
prepared.
folks. Yeah,
Yeah, we got a logo hand drafted by the Jake Jacobson. How are you doing this morning, Jake?
good. We just taped a Crom update, so now we're gonna look at the comics that influence, and we can do a flip through, which we haven't done in a while. So let's proceed. You look like you have now. How is it pronounced? Druillet. This is
Druillet.
right. This is a long time
Druillet.
contributor of heavy metal, epic, and magazines like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be just oozing and goozing. So there are two artists that are at the top of my focus when I'm making comics, but even more importantly, when I'm looking for comics. It's my vision. It's Spain Rodriguez and Druillet. Now, my favorite comic book story that are basically, in my opinion, the same kind of universe is Mobius's Airtight Garage, and then there's a sketchbook called Days in was it in Desert B or 40 Days? Yeah, 40 Days in Desert B. So with the having somebody like Mobius as your favorite, I think is pretty easy. But Druillet for me is a cross between as if Mobius and John Buscema were making a comic book. Like however they were making a comic. Stylistically a little bit, but just even like how figures are plotted in and out. Now I want to kind of drag you back to the 90s and how I was a flip-flopper on style finding. Like I was very much running around trying to find my style and working in different styles. And I remember you being a little frustrated with me because we would try to be working on something and you would go, well, yeah, and you keep doing it in that John Buscema style you've been working on. I'm like, oh, no, I'm into it was a Joe Madanera, it's just all over. But as I've hit my 55-year mark, I have just come to consolidate, like I said, things that make me say, yes, this is in alignment with me. So this is right around the same time Druillet does Lone Sloan, which is really that's his I guess his magnum opus or something to that extent. That's really what drives people to him is his Lone Sloan. And yes, he is one of the 3 or 4 contributors to Metal Hurlant, which becomes Heavy Metal Magazine that National Lampoon um, brings into the United States. But one of the things I have to say is it's called A Dragon's Book, a Dream Book. Is both you and I are big Hawkwind fans, and
Yeah.
psychedelic prog rock in the late 70s, was the soundtrack for I think a lot of like comics. And as it kind of goes into heavy metal and the 80s and power comics kind of drafting off of that, this is just nobody did it any better than Druillet in like I don't know what it's called when you're drawing and painting music and sound, but that's the feeling in his work. The frustration will be is that he does these. He doesn't work traditionally as a comic book paneling artist. In other words, like he doesn't take an 11 by 17 and put them together. And most of these pages, I think, are over 24 by 36 inches American size. I don't know what that converts to centimeters, but I've watched many documentaries of him in his studio, which has like a walkway around the top towards the roof where you can then look down on this big, huge center table and all these artifacts that he has lying around. But he works on, you know, I would say 24 by 36 pages and everything. So he really just brings, I think, I am getting so much glare, right?
A lot of
Get some of that away.
symmetry
Yeah.
there.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's, but
His architecture too is always intense and symmetrical, and geometric. Um, here we're seeing probably a lot more color than we're used to with him,
right.
Druillet, right?
I don't know. I think he's always been heavily colored, or colorized. I know there's been versions of his work. For instance, like just printing the black and white versions, like Chevet
Yeah.
Noir from Dark Horse Comics when they were doing those anthologies, and they were trying to kind of replicate the heavy metal feel. Lone Sloan was reprinted. The first Lone Sloan was reprinted as black and white line, but there's nothing stopping from there being different versions. And there's a guy I watch called Earl Grey who does heavily European based books. He's actually in, I think, Germany or Sweden or something to the extent. But anyhow, he's done, his favorite artist is Druillet, or one of the most favorite of his artists. And so he's got like, I don't know, a couple dozen reviews of books. And that's one of the things he's made comments to, is that the color plates, there can be a whole new set of colors applied to the work.
Yeah, I'm looking here and seeing Philippe Druillet was born in Toulouse, France in 1944. That makes him almost 80 now. And, it's really interesting when these artists, I doubt, I have no idea whether he's still producing or not, but
Oh, he
um,
is. I am
what,
Philippe Druillet on Instagram. I'll put a link down below. I follow him, and he's got people working for him doing all the promotion, but he's still very active.
Great. Well, that's one of the things with some of the artists that started before we did, like the earlier generations, because I heard on Kayfabe they were doing this interview with Alex Ross, who's also been
Mm.
around quite a while, and the challenge with those guys is, wow, do I have everything? Do I have a copy of everything? Can I publish it and monetize it and hand it down to my estate in a complete form, because once I'm not around, it's going to be hard to gather it all back up together. And some of these people do not have pristine digital copies of their work. Alex Ross is a painter, so he sold his paintings, and then he doesn't have a copy of it, and he just needs to ask for permission from the owner to take a high res photo of it, or to have it.
No, I don't. He's got archived photographs of his work for reprints.
No, he was saying
He
he was
he
saying,
was
and
saying that he had no
he had to
archival
chase, he
photographs
had to
of his
chase.
work.
He said a lot of the stuff you have to chase down, and and
Oh
he's
my
and he's much younger.
god!
He's much younger than somebody like Druillet. Like, can you imagine when before the advent of digital? Like, you make this for a for publication. You sell the original. You have a really good photo of it, or maybe a slide, or that's it. Before scanning was even a thing. Now, obviously, Druillet has copies of his stuff, and he's putting it back out. This is what you got to get together before you perish, and you leave this to your kids, and they don't even know, where to start looking and stuff. Um, and that's, if you even have kids, right? So, it's great to see these guys come out with these lavish coffee table books, and you could really just see everything. Like, this is a side of Juillet that I've never seen before. Some of his storytelling is very kind of like arcane. It brings you through visuals, right? And it doesn't necessarily You
It's a
know,
total immersive. It's total,
yeah,
like, look at this. This is the border for what's being said here about I mean, come on. Who's doing this?
right.
Like,
But then the words
it's
themselves is so cryptic, right? It's like these
but
times
it's
of
supposed
feast,
to
the
be. Yeah, it's
Templars, and the
supposed to
temples
be.
of meteors, and then the mad priests, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So with him, it's always been like, okay, I'm not. This isn't a story that goes from A B to C. This is going to be, like a little, dive into a world here, and I just have to
Yeah.
go with it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, by the
poet.
way, this is called Ragar right, yeah, Ragal So it's just basically just like you were saying. It's an individual moving through a cosmic space. So there's no factual tying anything down other than if somebody like Jake Jacobs wanted to start applying quantum physics and you know,
Right.
from based on some other conversations. But yeah, I mean, also I got this off eBay for $9.95,
What?
including shipping and handling. So
How did you?
I that's why, yeah, nobody knew. Like, I guess, I mean, it's a beat
Mhm.
up copy. I mean, this is a total reader copy, which
Oh,
I'm
that's cool.
totally fine with.
Yeah.
Because I sold off a majority of my collection because I had two moves in 2 years,
Yeah.
back in like 2008 and nine, I think it was. But anyhow, um, it's I'm working on my sword and sorcery material. Crom the Barbarian is a major sense of focus. I'm working with six other artists just to do a pinup of Crom, but I'm having them on Crom Updates, which is on my YouTube channel, Kurt Inker Comics below, and I'll have a link in the description below. But the cosmic alien otherworld feeling is what everybody comes into question. And it's something I very much want to push. I love truly and complete escapism in my work, and it being unapologetic. And this is, Druillet is that. And also in his history, he loses his wife to cancer very early. I think it's 79. And he
Uh-huh.
does a comic called The Night. And it's an homage to her. And she's the muse of it, but she becomes it's just, but it's like cosmic motorcycle gang, and like
What?
it's so incredible. I was just flipping through a digital version of it, but there was so much. There was once again there was that so much similarity to Spain Rodriguez, and the only thing Spain never did, and it would be the first question I would ask him if he was still around, was why didn't you do a Conan or a sword and sorcery kind of thing?
Wow.
Because like that barbarism, that barbarianism, that thing that just
He had plenty of
yeah,
barbarism.
yeah. Well,
Well,
I mean for that, but
yeah, no,
I'm going to
he
be soaking this stuff in. This book is probably going to get cut up. It's because so I can have pages like very, very close to me, if not working through them.
well,
Um,
you could also
but
just take a photo of it and do that. But
well,
the
whatever,
the,
whatever.
the
God,
the
listen,
thing
like
that you're
10
showing us,
bucks
this
or
is
whatever.
this is a project. I mean, this isn't even the definitive coffee table retrospective on Druillet. This is just one
No,
project that he
this was
put out.
printed by. Who printed this?
I mean, it looks like he was in
This
his
was put
heyday.
out. This is published by Dragon's Dream, 1974.
Wow. Yeah. So
Yeah,
he was
75. So there was a second printing in 75. And it's English. First
right.
English edition. Printed in Holland by Chevalier Rotterdam.
So you're looking at his work when he was in his late 20s.
Yeah, I mean he's full on. Like he's wide open. There's no, and like I said, as he moves towards, like, this is the only other parallel I could bring in is like, um, was it damn it, Jim Starlin, and what he brought to Marvel in his cosmic, but
He was very cosmic, but he was also storyteller. You know, he could
yeah, he was
sit down and
hammered
do.
down. Like he was hammered down to some sort of like, hey man, let's make this feel a little less off your feet all the time, like you've been smoking weed for 3 weeks straight, or you've just come out of an acid trip and you're just going to drink some mushrooms for breakfast. But
Right.
it's like,
Yeah, no, these
but
guys are
he's also
making.
pushing the medium.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, hey, you're a great artist. Have you ever considered putting together some comics? And then it's like, all right, how do I take my, basically my, architectural art, or my, symmetrical geometric art, and then, start making stories out of it. And here you can see he's drawing figures, he's drawing characters. It's very stylized.
Oh yeah,
And he's also from the same school and the same era, as Mobius. You can see that, a lot of the stippling and the line work, but he's bringing something else to the table here. I mean, look at these pages. Come on, and this guy's not even 30 yet, putting this stuff together, and he was really, really, cranking. This is kind of like the difference in the freedom that the European artists had versus
yeah, yeah.
American, where we have this big capitalist system, and we have to print out, comics for children,
I
using the characters that other people own. I mean, that was the epitome in
yeah.
1974.
You're
It was
right.
like,
You're right.
oh,
You're
can
right.
I get on the Hulk? Can I get on Conan? Can I get on a good book?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
and nobody was really in the U.S. People putting out lush coffee table books of this kind of thing. This is a dream, like to be an artist and to do where go wherever
yes,
your imagination takes you.
yes,
There was not,
yes.
and so that's a big difference between our countries.
Yeah, and going back to the '90s, was it Siripi's Druna? That was one sword that I was willing to die on. But he was so anatomically and mechanically connected to his sense of realism in his dystopian world. I just until very recently have become kind of settled with myself that if I move through this type of space, even working larger, I work 13 by 19 right now, and I'm thinking about jumping up to like 14 by 17. It just becomes a little bit of a pain in scanning, but I
Yeah.
just the amount of ability and space on page to allow things to happen, I think is just so much more graphically immersive for comic book storytelling. I
Yeah.
mean, look at it. You're telling me also this is not what people were picking up out of Heavy Metal magazine for graffiti. It was Von Baudet, Cheech Wizard, and Druillet. Like, look at that.
No, that didn't come out in the graffiti world until maybe the 2000s,
You
because
think?
they were
You
abstracting letters
think?
and putting 3D on it, but they weren't doing the multi planar
No, I'm
foreshort
not. I'm just
dimension.
this play on. I'm not even saying that this is a text, if you will, but just how close it is to Von Baudet
Yeah,
stylizing
no, that looks
words
like
as a
graffiti.
part of words and pictures. Comic books being word and pictures.
Yeah,
You
well, there
know,
is a school of graffiti now that has entered this like exaggerated 3D movement now, where it's not just you put some 3D on a letter. It's like, no, you're looking at it in multi perspective, like two point perspective, and people never thought of that before, but these guys are doing some very, very intense graffiti now, using letters that are like extruded in 3D in multi planar dimensions that we didn't do in the old days.
Yeah, and so to speak to the story, I do remember reading it, and it is a criticism people do place on Druillet's writing, is he's very psychedelic, purpley prose.
Uh,
He's pulpy. He's
but he's
I don't
writing
know
in
if anybody.
French.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well, yeah. I mean, that's the other problem, is that anybody translating him is going to have to move from French, let's say French sci-fi pulp, which is different from American sci-fi pulp, in the way that they're wording and describing things to be visual, to it being just, purpley
Yeah,
prose. So it's very textural. It's very gothic, maybe in one way, and uh,
it's quite a
like
product. It's quite a product. I
yeah,
mean, when you think about all that goes into his text too, on top of all this, you might say that, oh no, the text is secondary to this, but then you see his text and it's got like this, you can see the influence of poetry and lyrics at the time and music.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he was really focused in on a scene in France, Paris. I think Paris was really holding court, with Michael Moorcock. Like, Michael Moorcock has a home in Paris, and he got one back in I think it's late '70s, because he just found a lot of a similar headspace when it came to fantasy and all of
Hmm.
that. So, and the music too. And by the way, I just want to do a shout out to a band I am so tirelessly obsessed with right now, called Slift, Slift. And I'll put a link to their YouTube channel. I sent you a link to them.
Yeah, I watched an
And
hour.
they're from Toulouse. So, and
Yeah,
if anybody also wants to hear the reference to Toulouse, is Henri du Toulouse-Lautrec. That's where he comes from. So
right.
there's something down in that water in the south of France that just brings this like cosmic, like, this is Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft. And one of the things was, in the '90s, I dated a girl from France, and we got to meeting each other at a bar, and she wasn't into all the pickup lines and everything that I was throwing down. But for some reason, somebody said something about me being a comic book artist, and her eyes just got like really, really like bugged out. And she's like, "Well, what kind of comics and everything?" So I started saying, you know, "Oh, I read Mobius and Druillet," and I start throwing that all down, and then she says, "Have you read the original version of Planet of the Apes, which was written by a Frenchman?" Which
Right.
I didn't know. I
Right.
didn't know. So she gave me a heavy duty education in French sci-fi.
Yeah.
I mean, she was handing me book after book, translated in English,
Yeah.
because she would do that to be getting better at English and everything. But hands down, she was a teacher in opening my eyes up to, I was so magnetically connected to this artsy fartsy, cool psychedelic style, but I was missing the fact that French culture, or European, let's say, adjacent culture to France, was designing and building their own science fiction, their own language, and the such. And
Yeah, what you're
it's
showing that right now, if that comes out in '74, this is well before Heavy Metal magazine premiered in the U.S.
nah. Well, yeah. U.S., but it's going on in right now. In '74, right? They set up in '74. Heavy
What
Metal
Metal or
Armand.
not? Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's the big difference. I mean, the French must see us as churlish, uneducated,
Still
misanthropes.
today, still today, because
Right.
we keep dealing with the childish part of
Oh God.
making a comic book. We're not dealing with, I hate to say it when it comes to fantasy and exploitation, but the adult, the maturer version of dealing with a fantasy, if you will. You
Yeah.
know, you said it earlier, and I was gonna contradict you, but you're absolutely correct. When in the '70s, at the same time, we're dealing with corporatized, identifiable children's motifs as like fairy tales, and characters where that's where everybody was scrambling up the hill to do, you know. But going back to Jim Starlin, you know, he was one of those that punched a hole through it, mainly through Epic, which was Marvel's version of Heavy Metal Magazine. But he was able to come in and really, you know, but it goes flat. It's a lot of the edges are suppressed and
Yeah, I mean,
um,
what you're also alluding to, we're also getting at too. It's the same thing in the music business. Like, you know, everybody puts out these albums, and everybody's like, "Oh, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, they really made this into like an adult thing." But at the end of the day, it's like 13 and 14-year-old females that drive the music industry with their
there
spending,
you
right?
go.
The
There
most
you go.
expression, and
There you
so
go.
what you had over the years was like this bubblegum music that was, you know, really kind of like, you know, saccharine on the surface, but then there was all of this like subversion in the lyrics, and like, you know, yummy yummy yummy, I got love in my tummy, you know, all of this kind of stuff, like, you know, it was hidden, sometimes not so craftfully, you know, under the surface. And when you get to comics, you had that too. Like, you had Steranko and Starlin in these years that were just dying to get out of the mold, you know, that were dying to get out of the mold. But they knew that if you work for Marvel and you want to pay your rent, you know, you got to do like Punisher, or you got to do like one of these characters. And, you know, and look at the freedom they had in Europe. Like, do you think there's any editor here that's saying, you know what, some of this is a little heady. You think we should maybe tone it back and put a cute
Tone
dog,
it
put a cute dog in there somewhere, you know? And
down. Something for the girls.
right, right. Like, we could have a little like,
Yeah,
you think we could have a little sidekick, you know, that comes along,
yeah,
and it's like,
yeah, yeah.
so,
Well,
you know,
look,
that's our system. So, you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's
But
part of
yeah, I have gushed enough. I will continually. I have a couple of others of his books heading my way. So probably in the next few comics that influence will be more Druillet. But yeah, I'm
Yeah, and if
completely.
and when they talk about the comics that influence effect on saved searches, I think right now
Yeah.
you might want to try and beat Kurt to the next Druillet reader copy. That's only
Hey now, hey
$9.
now.
Come on, all right. Um, yeah,
So is this comic because you have the day off from school?
Reform School Skunk. Well, this comic, I have some more of Milton Knight somewhere else, but this is, you know, this came across my pile, and I haven't looked inside of it yet. This is Blackthorn Publishing, and you know, Milton Knight has such a distinctive style that I would have to put him in the camp with Vaughn Baudet. I would have to put him in the camp. I mean, he's a cartoonist, and he's had quite a career in comics. I'm going to read from his Wikipedia page here. Um, Milton Knight. Wait, hold on, Andrea here. Milton Knight started out in '82 with Fantagraphics. It looks like. He is an African American that was born in Mineola, New York, not too far from here. Um, he was born in '62, so a little bit ahead of us. And he was inspired by visiting New York museums and galleries, pop artists with a combinations of comic strips and fine art. Um, so from 1979 on, he illustrated for The Village Voice, Nickelodeon, National Lampoon, High Times, Heavy Metal, and others. They have Nickelodeon magazine in there, but I'm sure that was not in '79. He has designed comic books, record covers, posters, candy, and T-shirts. It looks like his first break was 1982. He connected with Kim Thompson of Fantagraphics, and they published Hugo, which was a one-shot billed as a fairy tale for adults. I sent you a photo of it so that you can put it here in on screen. But it was a dark, bleak, and frankly misogynistic view of life poured into a funny animal comic. You can see the effect of
He's
Felix.
center up,
You can
center
see
you're
the
up,
effect
center
of
center up.
the Fleischers and early Walt Disney, and just a lot of those like real kind of like retro cartoons. Here you're getting
Center, pull to center. Yeah, good. Keep.
yeah. Let me get like
There you go.
right.
There you go.
So
Stay
yeah,
center,
so
Sonny.
yeah, back from the start. This is one of his characters called Midnight, the Rebel Skunk, and when you talk about stylization, so he's got you know a lot of white and black going on, but when it's white, he's got a very very heavy outline that he uses, like a very bold outline that he uses, and like maybe you can see a little bit here, but there'll be some better examples later on. And so this is her skunk. Now, if you get into reading this stuff, some of this stuff is pretty, I would say, like bohemian, like not monogamous, like maybe polyamorous stuff.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
there's a lot of this where there's like lyrics here. You gotta love the way that he draws these legs, in this
Yeah, it's
like,
so graphically.
and
Yep,
he's
yep.
he's got a thing for like this thick body character, the Midnight Skunk. This. I mean, he is really showing influences of the underground, cartoonist, even though he's from a little bit of a later era here. And he went on. So this comic, Midnight Skunk, is circa 1987. So this is maybe like he's only 5 years into his comic career here, and he's cranking these out for Blackthorn. He did some stuff for Fantagraphics and their various imprints. He did get some work with Marvel, doing a Mighty Mouse comic, a 10 issue
Oh
series.
wow,
Yeah, and I
wow,
have never seen that. I've never heard of that.
wow.
I'd love to come across that. It was a spin-off of the Ralph Bakshi project, The New Adventures of
Mm,
Mighty Mouse, that
mm.
Marvel licensed, I guess. Um, this says that a little bit after the '80s were over in 1991, he became an animator, and he broke in
Whoa.
by being a director on the Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat in the early '90s. So he actually ends up working on Felix the Cat. You can see all the influence here from the Fleischer Brothers studios. Like,
And by the way, those comics, those I think they're Dell
uh-huh,
comics for Felix the Cat.
right?
Oh my lord! Very similar without the obvious emphasis on sexy, but that's just solid black and white
Yeah,
uh, layouts of pages where it's so tough to do for most people. But even just looking at this, it's like there's only like maybe where that big elephant is in the right hand corner, in the middle on the right hand page.
uh-huh.
Like if that was gray, I know it sounds cliche. It would be the only, I think, bonus to the flow of those pages. But the fact that it's not there, it doesn't bother me. It's just amazing how the eye is moved through all those black lines, heavy black lines, and spotted shapes of
Yeah, I
black.
mean,
It's just
what would it be like? Like
so.
this happens occasionally in regular cartoons, like Jack Kirby or maybe some other artists that just let themselves and say, "I'm going to put this outline now. I have a pencil line on. I'm going to put an outline with my brush now." And what would just happen if I pressed really hard and made it like so thick?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you see that sneaking through sometimes in Marvel and DC comics and other indie comics. But here it's like so intentional, right?
Yeah.
And and it's so interesting. Like everything is framed when he wants
It's
to.
thicker than the panel border.
Right, thicker than the panel
Isn't
borders
that
even.
crazy? Isn't that
Right,
crazy?
and so you're using line here as a tool. And why don't we do that more? Why don't
I don't
especially some
know.
of these guys that are cartoony and expressive, and because it does make that character, jump out more. Like it
Yeah.
shows the importance of that character. Now, the reason why he's not doing it a lot with the skunk is because she's filled in,
Yeah.
black, but he's also got some real interesting highlights on her character here. And I see a lot of Will Eisner here, with the expressive lettering, with the way that these the balance of white and black. Look, he's got a bust of Hitler being thrown. What the, what the hell is that? His stuff is very edgy when you actually sit down and read it, and I recommend all of his stuff. I recommend picking up anything from Milton Knight. Maybe somebody hasn't even heard of him before, but
May.
you never heard of Milton
I
Knight before?
Jake, this is the first for me, so thank you very much.
Oh wow, no, he's been around. So in the '90s, he also gets to do some character props, background, storyboard, and color designs for Disney, MGM, Rhythm and Hughes, Warner Brothers Animation, HBO, and others. Notable titles include Ralph Bakshi's Cool World, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat. Animation, mind you. That's where some of these guys were really having fun because they were making cartoons for kids, but they were imbuing it with all of these kind of adult sensibilities, sometimes subliminally, sometimes overtly. Mighty Mouse, of course, got in trouble because he was like sniffing some grass and he got high and he fainted in the grass and he had like a hallucination or something, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're glorifying drugs." Um, so there's this Wikipedia is not that great. In 2021, so Knight teaches art at the Colonnade Art Gallery and Studio in Pasadena. He is an animation archive volunteer for the International Animated Film Association. That sounds like he's doing some of that preservation work. CBR announced in 2021 that he would be providing commentary for the Blu-ray release of Adventures of Sonic, which provided all 65 episodes. Wow. And on 2019, Knight reported on his Facebook account that he was a victim of a hate crime. And that's it. It just goes into his bibliography. Animation, comics. So he did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That would sounds like it would be a good fit. He did Mighty Mouse. He did Betty Boop, which is Betty Boop. I guess is public domain now, or do we know?
Getting close to it, if not already.
If not, it's getting close. Yeah, Betty Boop was a Fleischer thing, and Fleischer predates Mickey Mouse, so I think Betty Boop is got to be public domain. Graphic classics: H.G. Wells, Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Conan Doyle adaptations. He worked Harveyville Fun Times, the graphic canon. I don't know what that is. Poker, Zora Neale Hurston adaptation. So yeah, he's done. And then for Fantagraphics, he did Hugo. He worked for Heavy Metal in the 80s. He did stuff for Screw Magazine, which is an adult newspaper here in the city, in New York City, back in the day. Midnight the Rebel Skunk. Mooney for MU Press, if you've heard of MU Press. Slug and Ginger. He did under the pen name Lou Hepton. I think I have a Slug and Ginger. He did Zoe in High Times Magazine, and he did World War III Illustrated. Music album covers, nobody I recognize here. A lot of different bands, but yeah, this is him here, and I only have a couple of pieces of his comics, but I always pick it up. I mean, he is something special here. You can
Yeah.
see, you know, like this chick, she's always on the go. She's always on the scam. Like he is influenced by some serious, I would say like even the beats and the counterculture and the
Yeah.
underground. There's a lot of kind of like adult stuff here without getting, too racy, to get an R rating or anything. and then all of this kind of like you know, kind of like this itchy and scratchy stuff, where there's like very violent incidents, and like she gets flattened out here. We've seen that a lot. Just really nice thick lines. I'm surprised you never heard of her, because he did stuff for Eros, which is one of the Fantagraphics imprints, but he's got a lot of good stuff. He's really got a lot of good stuff. Like this probably isn't even as good as some of the stuff I've seen, because more splash pages. I think also he had an influence on some others that came after him. I'm thinking maybe of like people like Steve Mannion, and me. I mean, I looked at this. I don't have a cartoony style, but you know, you just appreciate the.
Just to kind of bring back into play a conversation that you and I are always having. Um, when you use a word like cartooning, cartoonist kayfabe really changed that word for me, because I didn't watch the channel for a while because I'm a comic book artist. And so I really saw cartooning as a severity from what it is I was trying to accomplish as a comic book artist. But then a comic book artist friend of mine explained to me, no. These guys go through underground comics and they're big R chrome, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, I start watching them. And one of the things I really count on them in almost a daily way, watching their episodes, is when they talk about the language of cartooning. And that's no matter what comics are being produced at. The failure, and I'm even reflecting that upon my own work, the failure of it is not leaning more into the cartooning part. We just did that recording of Crom Update 17, where you art directed my third story, Conquering Giants for Crom. And that place where he's laying down, and you said, okay, well, he's laying there. Well, why don't we just put some Tweety birds and stars there?
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, I'm not going to go that far with the Tweety birds, but having something that graphic to help move the story along,
Yeah.
I think is very, very imperative. So, I wonder if, here, hold on a second.
I mean, they do it. They
Yeah,
do it in Japan. They do it in Japan. In Japan, they'll take
yes.
they'll take a hyper super detailed thing, and they'll just put like some Tweety bird lines around it.
Yes.
They just don't care in Japan, and
So the I'm flashing up on the screen. Daniel Warren Johnson, Wonder Woman's Dead Earth. We are going to be doing a three men and a comic review with Dan the Man from Rave Sensation next Sunday. But Daniel Warren Johnson is one of those individuals I was introduced to after like Becky Cloonan. And I think they're the ones that are bridging. Oh, and Paul Pope. Paul Pope is where I would say the intersection of like masculine American male driven comics, cartooning, and manga all sort of wish and wash and ferment together. And so I am like super excited about Dan, you and I really cutting into this and breaking it down, because it's the attraction that I'm starting to have more and more of when it comes to American comics. I always go back to the European stuff, Druillet being a very, very anchoring point for me. But just to come all the way back to what you were saying about your own work, Jake, it would be interesting to see you even instigate me as the inker on your pencils.
yeah.
More of these graphic qualities, heavier line here, outweighing the border panel borders. So.
Well, I got to wrap up. I just an alarm came up for me, so I got to wrap up. But
no worries.
This was another good one, and
absolutely.
There's just some great stuff to see here. So definitely recommend this to folks. And Yeah, let me sign off and tell folks you can check out our main channel, Turbo Pit Fighter. You can check out our other episodes of Comics That Influence, and don't forget to check out our Indie Creators Exchange. And we'll see you guys soon.
Absolutely. Take care, Jake. See you later.
Yep.